Thanks for tuning in to Curious Cat, the podcast that examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. Northern California. This stretch of sand, rocks, logging roads, wineries, tiny towns, and pulsing centers of culture are one of my happy places. Often when I travel here to visit family, I fly into Santa Rosa, a quaint airport that feels like a time capsule with touches of Peanuts cartoonist Charles Schultz everywhere. Fog-nipped mornings, the sound of a distant train, a winding stretch of trees, shoulders of highway that drop off to a rocky incline. This is a place best enjoyed like a glass of fine wine, one intentional sip at a time. From a lost bit of coastline to a community that has its own dialect that's about to go extinct, by the way, which might not be a bad thing after I did the research. There's a lot to learn about and love in Northern California. Let's get into it. There's a stretch of sumptuous, undeveloped landscape along the Pacific Ocean in NorCal that you must know about and might even inspire you to plan a road trip or hike. Have you heard of this place? California's Lost Coast. I hadn't until I was deep into research for this episode. I have driven up and down California my entire life, walked its beaches, hiked, run, and explored, but the term Lost Coast wasn't on my radar until now. I found out more at visitcalifornia.com, who writes, world-renowned Highway 1 cruises along 650 miles of the California coast from Orange County north toward the Mendocino coast. At its northern terminus, this epic route ends where it joins US 101, but the coast continues bending west just north of Fort Bragg. With no major roads to access this ocean-wrapped region, it is justly called the Lost Coast, but you can explore on foot. In fact, the nearly 25-mile-long Lost Coast Trail is on the bucket list of many an avid backpacker. Stretching between Shelter Cove to the south and the Mattole River to the north in both Mendocino and Humboldt counties, the Lost Coast is a wildland of forest, fog, waves, and sand. On the hike, which typically takes 3 days one way, you'll be wowed by sweeping views of the King Range, its peak soaring 4,000 feet above the Pacific. Walk a wild beach to discover shell mounds, marking the spot where Native Americans once shucked clams and other bivalves. Bring binoculars to spy impressive Roosevelt elk grazing in bluff-top prairies. Another essential item to pack, a current tide table. When the tide is high, boulder-strewn beaches and your trail disappear beneath the waves. Time your tromp right, or you could face a long wait in a flooded cove. To hike the entire Lost Coast Trail, leave one car at Mattole River Beach and the other at Black Sands Beach near Shelter Cove, or make arrangements with a local shuttle service. Not up for backpacking, but want to stretch your legs? Head for the Lost Coast Trail's northern terminus, accessed by following Lighthouse Road west from the hamlet of Petrolia. A 3-mile out-and-back trail south from Mattole River Beach affords an awesome photo op, the abandoned lighthouse at Punta Gorda. The end of the article reminds us the Lost Coast is a section of land between Rockport and Ferndale that was deemed impassable by builders of Highway 1. I found out more at secretsanfrancisco.com. Jamie Farrell writes, The indigenous Sinkyone, Mattole, and Wyatt peoples lived in the Lost Coast region for centuries, hunting and fishing throughout the land until the arrival of European settlement and the California gold rush in the 1800s. Settlers developed nearby towns like Ferndale and Shelter Cove in the 19th and 20th centuries. But the Lost Coast's rugged geography and frequent landslides thwarted any major attempts at developing this part of California. When highway construction began in the 20th century, the Lost Coast was bypassed. In the 1960s, some additional attempts at large-scale resort development again failed, partly due to growing conservation policies and the establishment of the California Coastal Trail Commission. These days, the Lost Coast continues to be protected as part of the King Range National Conservation Area. There are great blogs and YouTube videos if you're interested in driving the length of the Lost Coast, starting at Eureka and winding south to Fort Bragg. Or if you want to enjoy a 3-day hike as a personal challenge, try the 25-mile Lost Coast Trail. By the way, one of the towns along this stretch is named Petrolia, as in petrol, because this was the site of California's very first oil pump. Want a less expensive way to experience the Lost Coast? Well, put your name in now for a permit with the state of California, and next year you could be one of the lucky few to hike the 25-mile-long Lost Coast Trail. If the thought of hiking for 3 days makes your hammies cramp up and your back ache, how about a road trip along the route? Start off in picture-perfect Eureka, head south through Victorian-era insta-darling Ferndale, where you can sleep over in a quaint and possibly haunted inn or Airbnb, then keep moving south after breakfast. Explore ancient and massive redwood and sequoia forests, and then stop for a weekend in my favorite California town, Fort Bragg. There's plenty to do on this stretch of the coast with breweries, old cemeteries, oceanside walks, fishing, shopping, and plenty of haunted places to investigate, including the Gray Whale Inn. Before you venture back to the world, say hello to my dad, Gary Riley, by pouring a fresh beer into the waters of Noyo Harbor. Between Bodega Bay and Healdsburg lies a strange place, and not the kind of strange I ever want to personally see. By the way, it's called the Bohemian Grove, where it's said elites plan the course of humanity during a 2-week glam camp of sorts mid-July every year. But sorry, if you have a vagina, forget about being invited. Like other penile challenged cults, secret societies, the Bohemian Grove is for men only. Google Maps says this about Bohemian Grove. Landmark redwood forest encampment for an invitation-only men's club dating back to the 1870s. It is open 24 hours a day. It has a wheelchair-accessible parking lot, lies yards from the Russian River, and in mid-July hosts prominent men from across the globe. That 2-week stretch includes camp activities, not s'mores and ghost stories around a fire pit. Nope, they're not singing Kumbaya either, braiding each other's hair, or making dream catchers out of popsicle sticks and yarn. They are burning owl effigies and participating in rituals called cremation of care. Okay, I've decided I don't care. Speaking of care, I cast a disco ball around all of them, mirrors glued to the inside so that whatever they're manifesting only touches them and them alone. Enough of this patriarchy BS. I'm not giving them any more of my energy. Actually, I'm calling back my energy now. You can bear witness. I'm not putting links to any of this in the show notes, but you're free to Google it all you like. I feel like now is a good time for a serious timeline cleanse, right? How about a place on the Northern California coast that's sole focus is to rescue species from the brink of extinction? You might have spotted bits of it in a hit movie a few years ago. I fell in love with a giraffe there. Called Bryan Preserve, they are located south of Fort Bragg and Mendocino. Here's how they define themselves from their website. We are a private preserve actively committed to the breeding and preservation of African hoofstock. Our various species of zebra, giraffe, and antelope range from critically endangered to endangered and range themselves personally in large open fields on our property in Point Arena, California. You can't just show up to the preserve and have yourself a looky-loo, though. They are in the business of animals first, which means if you want to visit the preserve, you need to sign up in advance for a tour. The ticket price goes back to the animals, and it comes with lots of information, as well as a shop where proceeds again go towards the care and keeping of this magnificent preserve. Why hoofed animals? Here's what they had to say on their website. Founder Dr. Frank Mello and his wife Judy have always been wildlife enthusiasts. Frank, a Northern California native, met Judy in the corporate world in Mississippi, where Judy was born. Judy was fortunate to be able to spend time in several parts of Africa, experiencing the beauty of the flora and fauna that the continent provides. Frank was introduced to sable antelope on a trip to West Texas. That interaction led to a desire to protect and study the majestic animals. In 1998, on family land in Mississippi, the Mellos founded Bryan Preserve for the study and conservation of some of the most beautiful antelope in the world, sable, roan, and greater kudu. An opportunity for Judy to move her job to Northern California became available in 2004. They purchased a 100-acre ranch and moved their 11 animals to Point Arena in Mendocino County. Since then, endangered gravies and Hartman's mountain zebra and Rothschild's giraffe have been added to the preserve. Wildlife habitats around the world continue to decline. Many species are on the verge of extinction because they're being forced out of their native habitat. Degradation of grazing land, overpopulation of humans leading to more poaching for human survival, and AK-47s in the hands of rebels due to political and social unrest continues to create a crisis for many animals in their native lands. There is nothing more exciting and extraordinary than hearing the thundering hooves of a herd of zebra or antelope running across the plains. Groups of animals in large open spaces are a sight to behold. However, many people will never be able to go to Africa and view these majestic creatures in their native habitat. Through educational tours at the Bryan Preserve, we try to instill visitors with a sense of hope for the future as they learn about the ways we can enhance conservation efforts and get involved with wildlife. By providing up-close and personal interaction with the animals, we hope to encourage visitors to take an interest in the conservation of some of the most magnificent animals on the planet. We also hope to provide awareness of the plight, not only of our species of animals, but also what is happening on the African continent. While the future can seem bleak for these animals and our shared environment, there are steps you can take to support our work. Simply coming in for a tour or staying for a weekend helps fund our efforts. You can also donate online, in person, or by mail. It takes a lot of hay to keep the preserve open and operating. You heard that right, by the way. They have 4 unique cottages if you want to stay for a night or two. I put links to the Bryan Preserve in the show notes if you're compelled to learn more, plan a visit, or donate. Thank you. There's a unique property for sale on California's Lost Coast. Now, by the time you're hearing this, it may have already gotten scooped up by someone. But if not, manifest $11 million and this baby could be yours, complete with your own herd of zebras. And now that you know they're endangered, what are you waiting for? San Francisco Gate writes this about the property. When Alex and Miranda Moore bought a historic Humboldt County ranch on the edge of the iconic Lost Coast 5 years ago, the deal came down to a single condition. It wasn't financing, insurance, or whether the century-old barn still stood square. It was the zebras. When we bought the property, my wife was adamant that the zebras came with it. Alex Moore told SF Gate. He brought it up with the realtor who assured him right away. He said that you can have the zebras, like absolutely they come with the property. The animals, 5 of them now, are a legacy of previous owners who tried to transform the ranch into a French country estate, complete with imported thatched roofs and hand-chiseled stone walls. That vision fizzled, leaving behind half-finished projects and a herd of zebras that have since claimed the property as their own. They don't want to leave the property. They don't want to go out of the gate, Moore said. That's their place, and they make that well known. The Moore's 788-acre property sits at 26,000 Mattole Road in Humboldt County, found on the western edge of the Mattole Valley and about a 45-minute drive south of the Victorian village of Ferndale. It lies just below Cape Mendocino, the westernmost point in California, and just north of the King Range Wilderness, the federally managed sweep of mountains and shoreline that defines the Lost Coast. The ranch is now in the market for $10.95 million. Locals sometimes call it the Zebra Ranch, more pointed to its older roots. The barn that's on the property was the first barn that was built in the Mattole Valley. Unlike the sheer cliffs that dominate much of the Lost Coast, this property offers a rare mile of gentle, walkable shoreline. There's no big erosion or cliffs or slides like you see in a lot of California's really rugged coastline. This one is really gentle, Moore said. Beyond the beach, the land cuts inland into forests and meadows, threaded by a year-round creek that's crossed by a stone bridge, which earlier owners had built. These landscapes support thriving wildlife habitats for deer, elk, wild hogs, bears, and turkeys. One of the most unusual legacies left behind by past owners is the zebras. Moore believes the first pair arrived 10 to 15 years ago. Since then, they've bred into a small herd that treats the ranch as their home turf. They like to hang out around the house. They like to be near people, but they keep their distance, Moore said. But surprisingly enough, they could easily just jump over the fence and leave if they wanted to, but they don't. The zebras even mingle with cattle grazing on the land by a neighboring rancher, Moore said, having watched the zebras work with the cattle a little and wanting to naturally kind of corral them and keep the cattle together. He said, "It's interesting." The Moores never planned to part with the property so soon. They live full-time in Ferndale, about a 45-minute drive north, and had imagined retiring at the ranch. But with kids in school and one daughter, quote, doing every sport and every after-school thing you could ever imagine, end quote, weekends at the ranch grew rare. "It's really hard to let go of this property," Alex Moore said. "I'm telling you, it's one of the most incredible properties I've ever seen." Baxley echoes that. Opportunities like this don't come up very often, if at all. And yes, in case you're wondering, the zebras still come with the place. Slightly south and a bit east of Mendocino lies a town in Northern California where they speak their own dialect. I remember my little brother as a 3rd grader telling me something about this, but only now am I learning the details. Here's what Wikipedia has to say about the language called Boontling. Boontling is a jargon or argot spoken only in Boonville, California. It was created in the 1890s. As of 2015, it was considered nearly extinct with fewer than 100 living speakers, many of whom were not fluent. It has an Internet Assigned Number Authority, or an IANA, subtag of Boont, B-O-O-N-T. The lingo has become somewhat infamous, at least in local circles or within the legends of California, owing to its small-town nature and curious-sounding name, as well as its very limited speakership. The language gained attention in the 1960s and 70s from researchers like Myrtle R. Rawls and Charles C. Adams, as well as publicity brought from Boontling speaker Bobby Chipmunk Glover and historian Jack Weefus June. Although Boontling is based on English, many of its unusual words are unique to Boonville, California. Scottish Gaelic and Irish and some Pomoan and Spanish words also contribute to this jargon. Boontling was invented in the late 19th century and had quite a following at the turn of the 20th century. It is now mostly spoken by aging counterculturalists and native Anderson Valley residents. Because the town of Boonville has only a little more than 700 residents, Boontling is an extremely esoteric jargon and is quickly becoming archaic. It has over 1,000 unique words and phrases. The Anderson Valley, of which Boonville is the largest town, was an isolated farming, ranching, and logging community during the late 19th century. There are several differing versions as to the origin of Boontling. Some assert that the jargon was created by the women, children, and young men in the hop fields and sheep-shearing sheds as a means of recreation, and that it spread through the community as the children continued using it when they grew up. Another origin story recounted by Myrtle R. Rawls is that Boontling was created by the children of Boonville as a language game which enabled them to speak freely in front of elders without being understood. Such an origin is credited to two children, Ed Squirrel Clement and Lank McGimsey, who started making up words in the summer of 1890. Boontling received its 15 minutes of fame, enjoying a national audience in the mid-70s when a Boontling speaker named Bobby Chipmunk Glover was a regular guest on the well-known Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson on the NBC TV network. Boontling historian Jack Weefus June appeared on the game show to tell the truth. Because Boontling is a spoken jargon rather than a written one, spellings of its words vary greatly. Most spellings were not formalized until the 70s, primarily by the writings of Jack Weefus June. Okay, I couldn't resist. Here is a tiny sampling. I know I'm probably mispronouncing all of it, but I'm going to give it a go. An abe, to butt or crowd in so as to push a person out of line and take their place. Beelgeek is a rabbit, a blend of Belgian hare and jackrabbit. Bluebirded is to be bucked off a horse. One of the boys got bucked off a horse and afterward said, "I got thrown so high that a bluebird could have built a nest on my butt." Bright lighter is an outsider, anyone not from Boonville. Bucket of blood, that's a nickname of a Boonville bar known for its fights. Eaten lizards, referring to someone or an animal that is unhealthy, skinny, comes from when feral cats eat the local lizards in the valley. They get extremely sickly and skinny. Madge is a prostitute. Madge was an actual brothel madam in Ukiah. Zeese is coffee. Zachariah Clifton, or ZC, or Zeese Blevins, was a coffee drinker who liked his coffee strong. A good chunk of their words center around sex with themselves or others and calls to mind kids in 7th grade who were passing notes, me included, except we outgrew it. It's no surprise this language is considered extinct based on their obsession with classifying people's ethnicities and genders and the very nature of this dialect to speak openly about outsiders without them knowing what was said. Okay, I think that's what I call karma, that it's dying out. I dedicated an entire episode to Mount Shasta during my Cascadia season. If you missed it, I've put a link to that episode in the show notes. The peak scared the crap out of me as a kid and as an adult. Just a few years ago, seated by the window flying over the Cascade mountain range, I saw the mountain from above and it gave me a solid scare. Only InYourState.com has this to say about Shasta. For some people, Mount Shasta is California's Skywalker Ranch. Mount Shasta is referred to as the root chakra of the world because it is thought to be a grounding force for the planet and a powerful spiritual epicenter. Native American legends and modern lore have said that the mountain holds many powers, and anomalies regularly occur around the mountain, and they warn outsiders not to venture above the tree line. Ever. There are stories about mythical creatures inhabiting the mountain, and others say the mountain is the home of technologically advanced beings who live beneath its peaks. Some have even said that the mountain is the location of the hidden city of Telos on the supposed lost continent of Lemuria. To this day, the mountain is a big draw for many spiritual seekers. I found out more from Backcountry Magazine. They reported this in 2023. When I first caught sight of Mount Shasta over the braided folds of the Sacramento Valley, I was 50 miles away and afoot, alone and weary. Yet all my blood turned to wine, and I have not been weary since. John Muir wrote that of the mountain on the horizon. John Muir, of course, was not the first to feel the mountain's power. Thousands of years before he set foot in California, the Shasta, Atsugawi, Achuwami, Wintu, and Modoc tribes residing near Shasta incorporated the distinct peak into their cosmologies, though documentation is inconsistent. One Wintu legend traces their people's origins to a sacred spring on the mountain. A Modoc story says, at last the water went down, then the animal people came down from the top of Mount Shasta and made new homes for themselves. They scattered everywhere and became the ancestors of all the animal people. But these are not Shasta's only legends. The article shares stories of gold, the lost city of Lemuria, and more. Be sure to check it out on your own time by clicking on the link in the show notes. Also, please don't forget to listen to my Cascadia Mount Shasta episode. I found the story of Joaquin Murrieta on onlyinyourstate.com. Kate Friedman writes this: a notorious outlaw and bandit who operated in California during the mid-19th century. He was known as the Robin Hood of the West or the Robin Hood of El Dorado. The details of his life are still disputed to this day, but legend has it that he amassed a significant amount of stolen gold and treasure during his criminal activities. After his death, stories circulated that his secret loot was buried somewhere in the rugged terrain of Northern California. Many have searched for his treasure, but its exact location remains unknown. Murrieta's enduring legacy extends beyond his notoriety, as he is believed to have inspired the creation of the iconic literary character Zorro, introduced in Johnson McCulley's 1919 novel. Here's a little bit more in case you're interested in attempting to find the lost treasure. Specific stories include a strong box of gold buried near the Feather River in California, gold coins rumored to be hidden by his wife with a stolen map, and general tales of hidden riches across the state. While the specific amount and location of a single lost treasure are unconfirmed, the idea of Murrieta's hidden wealth has become a popular legend in California's gold rush history. One widely circulated legend claims that Murrieta and his right-hand man, Three-Fingered Jack, buried a strong box containing approximately 250 pounds of gold nuggets on the banks of the Feather River, south of Paradise, California. Okay, they got me. Any legend that includes a three-fingered guy calls to mind the Goonies. Or is it just me? Another story suggests that Murrieta hid his treasure, possibly including diamonds, on a property called the Rincon near Carpinteria, California, which is a stone's throw away from Santa Barbara. His wife was said to have a map to the location, but that was stolen and the loot was eventually returned to the rightful heir. Beyond specific incidents, it is widely believed that Murrieta and his gang frequently stashed their stolen loot throughout California while evading the law. So basically, while you're out venturing, keep your eyes alert. Treasure could be right under your hiking boots. Here's some other fun and interesting places in Northern California. California has its own Old Faithful. This geyser in Calistoga erupts every hour for 4 to 8 minutes. Nearby, you can explore a petrified forest. This is a collection of some of the best petrified trees in the U.S. There's a half-mile loop trail that highlights many of these preserved trees. The first tree was discovered in 1878 by Charles Evans. Later, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a poem about the tree and his encounter with what he called Petrified Charlie in his book, The Silverado Squatter, which forever branded the tree with a name. In Nevada County, you'll find the Kentucky Mine Museum. I've not been, but I'm eager to check this out. This museum has been called one of the best maintained gold mines in all of California. It is 4 stories tall, and the belt-based system still functions to this day. They also have lots of bats that live in the stamp mill, and if you're lucky, you'll see them. If Ghirardelli Square isn't enough to satisfy your sweet tooth, in the heart of bustling San Francisco's Union Square, you'll find San Francisco's Museum of Ice Cream. Okay, need I say more? It's ice cream and a museum. If you happen to be near Santa Cruz, stop by the city of Aptos. They have a vending machine that sells eggs. It's no surprise that it's attached to an egg farm. When you buy your eggs, a curtain rises and you're treated to a fun musical show. Okay, I mentioned that I fly into Santa Rosa, home to Charles Schultz. Well, he did a lot of giving back with the money he earned drawing Snoopy and the gang. One of those charitable projects is Snoopy's Home Ice. It is an ice rink Charles Schultz imagined and paid for as a gift to the community, and it's still a famous ice rink today. I find it adorable that the same general design and shape of the ice arena is the same as the Snoopy snow cone maker sold at toy stores from the 70s to the present day. I should buy my brother Garth one of those to make up for ruining his by stuffing it full of raisins. I was sure this magic machine could turn something I hated into ice cream if I cranked hard enough and wished even harder. Oh well. CaliforniaThroughMyLens.com, who also has lots of YouTube vids that are fantastic, by the way, mentioned Bumpus Hell, and he wrote this: the geothermal pits in Lassen National Park are a total trip. They stink, they are strangely colored, and are hot. It's like what you would see in Yellowstone, only in California. Then there's the Giant Rock in Landers, California. One of the most enormous freestanding boulders in the world, it stands in a desert, is steeped in Cold War and UFO secrets, and you can drive right up to the thing. If your travels take you near Ukiah, stop at this humble rock on the corner of State and Church Streets. Okay, it's not gigantic and you can't drive your car directly up to it, but this little thing has a plaque on it. And the plaque is hard to find, apparently, but it's a modest tribute to the prostitutes that once plied their wares in Ukiah. Okay, can we just all agree that's a really tough way to make money? They deserve a better tribute than a rock. Maybe like a tree or a rose garden. Anyway, whatever. And finally, Queen Khalifa's Magical Circle in Escondido. This is a dynamic, open-air playground of sorts. Get inspired by walking through, around, and sitting within this explosion of mosaic art, mirrors, and colors. Just check the hours it's going to be open before you head there. No conversation about Northern California weirdness would be complete without a Zodiac update. I'll be giving you one after a quick break.
If you haven't heard yet, the Homewrecker Podcast isn't your typical podcast.
Join us, Alex,
and Monique,
as we discuss a wide range of topics.
Like spiritual healing, privacy, ghosts, conspiracy theories, health, self-sufficiency, aliens, and pretty much anything else we want.
Ghosts? Conspiracy theories? Who believes in that stuff?
We do.
Allegedly.
Supposedly.
In theory. So listen to us and subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, Google Play, or anywhere else you enjoy your podcasts.
Help us wreck and shatter conventional wisdom and ways of thinking while having some fun in the process.
Hey, that's my line.
Yeah.
Northern California was the Zodiac's killing ground. His or they. They, if you believe like me that the Zodiac was multiple people. But after binging Netflix' new documentary miniseries, This is the Zodiac Speaking, I wanted to see if I could find some solid updates. How Stuff Works had this. Gary Francis' post made headlines after his death as a suspected Zodiac killer. But is there enough evidence to finally close the case? Gary Francis Post, born in 1937 and died in 2018, was an Air Force veteran and house painter who lived in Groveland, California. Post was arrested in 2016 on domestic violence charges and died in 2018 at the age of 80. In 2021, a civilian volunteer group called the Case Breakers announced they had identified Gary Francis Post as the elusive Zodiac killer through a, quote, combination of evidence involving shell cartridges, photos, fingerprints, cryptic writings, and DNA harvested from his old clothing and a blood relative, end quote. The Zodiac killer is the alias of an infamous killer who terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 60s. At least 5 murders are widely attributed to this serial killer. The high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were both shot to death in December 1968 in Benicia, California. Michael Renaud Magoo and Darlene Elizabeth Farron were shot in July 1969 in Vallejo, California. Magoo survived the attack, but Farron did not. Brian Calvin Hartnell and Cecilia Ann Shepard were stabbed in September 1969 in Napa County, California. Shepard died as a result of her injuries, but Hartnell survived. Paul Lee Stein was shot to death in San Francisco in October 1969. Some people believe the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, California was also the work of the Zodiac killer. The attention-seeking Zodiac killer was able to generate a media frenzy by sending disturbing cryptogram-containing letters to local newspapers, including the San Francisco Chronicle. 2 of the 4 cryptograms have been deciphered. The July 1969 408 cipher was decoded soon after its publication, while the November 1969 340 cipher was cracked in 2020 by a group of amateur code breakers and confirmed by the FBI. As of April 2024, 2 of the Zodiac killer's cryptograms remain unsolved. According to the New York Times, we may never know what they say for sure because they are so short. It's difficult to definitively prove that a code breaker has used the correct cipher. At the time, the San Francisco FBI confirmed that the Zodiac killer case remains an ongoing investigation. Unfortunately, cracking the 340 cipher did not provide any clues as to the Zodiac killer's identity. The unusual nature of the murders inspired films including Dirty Harry in 1971 and Zodiac in 2007. Although law enforcement has not released the names of any official suspects in the case, amateur investigators have proposed several theories. Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was considered the most likely Zodiac suspect in the 1990s. The former Vallejo schoolteacher was institutionalized in 1975 on charges of child molestation. Lawrence Kane. Kane allegedly stalked victim Darlene Farron before her death. Then there's Ross Sullivan. Some believe Sullivan, a former library assistant at Riverside City College, was involved in Sherry Jo Bates' murder. Then there's Earl Van Best Jr. In his 2014 book titled The Most Dangerous Animal, Gary Stewart claimed his birth father, Earl Van Best Jr., was the Zodiac killer. To date, none of the Zodiac killer suspects have been proven guilty. The case breakers say they know Gary Francis Post was the Zodiac killer because of DNA evidence obtained from a hiking mat and blood relative, as well as a tip from an FBI agent. Other clues include the Zodiac killer was believed to have forehead scars. Post had forehead scars as well. The Zodiac killer and Post allegedly shared the same shoe size. Post lived near the areas where the murders occurred and owned firearms. Evidence suggesting Gary Francis Post was not the Zodiac killer. Okay, although outlets like the New York Post were quick to declare Gary Francis Post the real Zodiac killer after the casebreakers' announcement in 2021, the FBI insists that their investigation of the Zodiac killer remains open and active. Many have pointed to the lack of hard evidence in the casebreakers' claims. For anything even more current, I turn to the ever-compelling subreddit Zodiac Killer, where Nathan Alder 91 asks this: if Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac, why did he do it? And I've been wondering the same thing ever since. Motivation. Nathan continues, having just watched the Netflix doc, one thing I've noticed about cases for Arthur Lee Allen's guilt is that they have typically are built on getting into these really granular coincidences, but I can't help but think it's missing the forest for the trees. Often when serial killers are caught, there's something in their psychology where one can understand why they did what they did. For instance, with killers like Peter Sutcliffe or Ted Bundy, they both had a very intense hatred of and contempt for women. Therefore, they killed women. But does anything about Arthur Lee Allen fit with what the Zodiac did? One thing about Allen, which no one disputes, is that he sexually abused children. That's a very specific pathology, and his actions of inserting himself into his victims' lives and forming relationships with their parents is a typical pattern of behavior with that kind of offender. Zodiac, however, did not target children. Aside from the Paul Stine murder, the taxi driver in San Francisco, which was so anomalous that I'm of the opinion it was a spur-of-the-moment action, Zodiac specifically went after young adult couples. When I imagine what kind of person committed these murders, as someone with full disclosure, no expertise here, this is just my opinion. I think Zodiac was someone who had little to no success with women. Judging by his correspondence, he was probably the kind of man women would find deeply off-putting, and given his affinity for powerful fantasies and the way he seems to need to build his confidence over the course of each murder. And he gives this example. He starts by shooting a couple from the other side of the car, to going up to their car, to tying them up and stabbing them. This suggests to him that Zodiac was a very meek and timid person in his day-to-day life, which also would explain why the murder stopped after Paul Stine. He was, at the heart, a coward and got spooked after such a close call with the cops. Looking for related crimes a suspect might have committed, I would look for things like stalking or voyeurism. I think that's why I'm not convinced Arthur Lee Allen is a suspect. They don't really seem like the same person." End quote. I'm hoping that maybe advances in DNA will give us answers one day. I sure hope so. I couldn't leave off on such a grim note, so I turned to onlyinyourstate.com for this final story. 11 quirky facts about Northern California that sound made up but are 100% accurate. Number 1, there are more dogs than children in San Francisco. If you've driven through San Francisco, you may have noticed all the doggy daycares, dog clothing stores, and all the people walking dogs. There's even a major dog festival, the NorCal Corgi Con, a fun beach day for corgi owners. The rumor that there are more dogs than children in San Francisco is true. The city is truly a dog lover's paradise. Number 2, Northern California is home to 2 Bigfoot museums. Bigfoot lore has long fascinated the public, and Northern California is no exception. In fact, there's enough interest that 2 museums in Northern California are dedicated to this elusive creature. One is located in Felton, just north of Santa Cruz, and another is in Willow Creek, east of Eureka. These Bigfoot museums are so much fun to visit, and maybe, just maybe, after a visit, you'll be a believer too. Number 3, the Northern California University town of Chico is home to the world's largest working yo-yo. In Chico, there's a well-known gift shop called Bird in Hand. Inside this gift shop is the U.S. National Yo-Yo Museum and the world's largest working yo-yo. The giant yo-yo measures 50 inches tall and weighs 256 pounds. Number 4, a frog jumping competition takes place every year in Calaveras County. Famous American writer and humorist Mark Twain penned his well-loved short story, The Famous Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, in 1865. It was his first big hit, and the story earned him national attention. Twain lived in Angels Camp in Calaveras County when he wrote that story, and in 1928 the first frog jumping competition was held. It's been a popular yearly event ever since. People from all over the state bring real live frogs to compete in this fun competition. The current record is held by Rosie the Ribbitter, who jumped more than 21 feet in 1986. Number 5, the world's largest Monopoly board is in San Jose. Play a life-size game of Monopoly in San Jose. Groups can rent out the massive board and even have a referee. Monopoly in the Park was built in San Jose's Discovery Meadow in 1992. It covers 930 square feet and is the largest Monopoly board in the world. Number 6, the world's largest box of raisins is in Kingsburg. Just off Interstate 5 near Fresno is the Sun-Made Market and the world's largest box of raisins. This quirky raisin box statue was built in 1992 and originally was filled with 16,500 pounds of sun-made raisins to establish a world record in the Guinness Book of World Records. Today, tourists line up to take a photo with the giant raisin box. Number 7, a dog served as an honorary mayor of the town of Sunol. The small town of Sunol outside of Fremont elected a dog as an honorary mayor in 1981. Bosco Ramos beat out 2 humans in the race and ended up serving as honorary mayor until his death in 1994. A statue of Bosco was erected in front of Sunol's post office. Number 8, the fog in San Francisco is named Carl, and it even has a social media account. Carl the Fog is the name of the perennial fog that envelops the city. All San Francisco residents know about Carl and occasionally read updates on Carl's Twitter account. Over the years, Carl's notoriety has grown. Today, Carl has an official website as well as products like coffee and other merchandise. Number 9, the California State Capitol has a memorial to a feral cat that lived on the grounds for 13 years. Senator Capitol Kitty was a beloved feral cat that lived on state capitol grounds for more than a decade. Former California First Lady Sharon Davis wrote about the cat in her children's book, The Adventures of Capitol Kitty, an almost true story. The memorial plaque, complete with paw prints, can be seen near the state capitol. Number 10, the Golden Gate Bridge was not supposed to be red. When parts of the bridge were delivered, they were covered in this orange-red primer to prevent corrosion. One of the bridge architects liked the paint color since it could be easily seen in the famous San Francisco fog, so the color choice remained. We can't imagine this iconic bridge being any other color. Number 11, Lake Tahoe has its own version of the Loch Ness Monster called Tahoe Tessie. Tahoe Tessie is said to live in an underground tunnel in Lake Tahoe. There are many images and videos online of people claiming they saw Tessie. Researchers have said Tessie sightings are most likely to be misidentified fish, but sightings of the beast continue to this day. Many businesses in the area have capitalized on Tessie by using her image as their logo. Did California out-weird Florida, or is it just a different flavor of strange? There are no losers here, only entertained ears. Until next week, stay curious. I love you.